Deleted session, January 10, 1979. Good evening. Now, I have given some, not all, of this material before, but now you can put the understanding to better advantage. Rupert's overly conscientious self was indeed built up in response to his belief that he was, to begin with, overly enthusiastic, overly impulsive, overly spontaneous. He was naturally expressive and open with people. He was creatively gifted. But an overly impulsive child does not care for an invalid mother. Conscientiously, for 21 years, he did not run away. He did not get into any serious difficulty. The very consistent writing of poetry through those years shows its own kind of discipline. But people are not used to bursts of creativity. They were not used to Rupert's very quick insights. He thought of himself as overly impulsive. Very seldom did he yell back at his mother. An impulsive child might have done far more. He refrained from heavy sexual encounters, certainly not the behavior of a sexually impulsive person. He knew he didn't want a family. Here we see purpose, strong intent, and despite the ins and outs with mood. And the youthful wondering, the same purpose to write, to express oneself, to observe and to stand apart from the mainstream of American life. You considered yourself not impulsive, yet it is you who wrote Make Me a Galaxy, Jane. Took up with Rupert after a very brief acquaintanceship and brought him home to your startled family. It was you who suggested the ESP book, and you also early decided not to become a part of the American mainstream of life. You did not have a strong drive to have a family. You avoided heavy sexual relationships also. Both of you, before you met, knew that you wanted to study and observe from your own viewpoints. You felt that a family life would automatically plunge you into the kind of living that would not allow you such luxury. At the same time, both of you to some extent feared what you thought of as the power of sex. Again, Freudian beliefs that filled the books and the movies led you both in your own ways to fear that your energies could be swallowed by sexuality, that to some extent you had so much energy, and that most of it must go into creative work. More than this, the Freudian concepts said more or less that each person, regardless of their individuality, was driven by sexual energies of great force. There was in such a system no room, literally, for individual differences, but a norm set so that you must behave thus and so. Now, if you did not express your sexuality through sexual experience, as prescribed, you were in for trouble. So went the tale. You found yourself married, Rupert as a woman, with those beliefs in the background, determined not to betray the writer, Jane, or the artist, Rupert, through becoming pregnant or making too much sexual demands. Rupert incidentally had a natural abortion, because the message was already in the body, and all of his worries and concerns were unnecessary. There are bodies in those terms who do not want to have physical offspring. They are not faulty. They fit in with nature's planes and with the psychological planes of the personalities involved. You were rather repressed at that period, frightened about your own work, and sometimes you would ignore Rupert's occasional sexual advances when you happened to be in your studio. He felt he was too spontaneous, again, too impulsive. But then, in that belief system, he worried if his sexual needs could not be properly squashed, supposing someone else aroused them, and he fell in love with someone else as quickly as he had fallen in love with you. Or worse, supposing your repressed sexuality was repressed because of your joint work. And supposing you fell in love with someone else and became sexually aroused for another. Rob noted, I can safely say that such ideas never occurred to me. She said, the entire premise is highly faulty. For the species deals with value fulfillment and quality, as do all forms of life, and not with mere physical reproduction. The sexual aspects of men and women do not exist apart from their individual psychological make-ups, but connected with all of the other unique individual characteristics. Now, give us a moment. Those beliefs at that time helped give rise to further conservatism on Rupert's part. Now, in certain terms, physical activity, sports, intrigued you. They were highly acceptable masculine pursuits. They were mainstream America. They allowed you to participate with others, to communicate with them on one level, while at other levels you preferred solitude, painting and writing, and you always observed. The hay fever began early, the example set by your father, and you used it to temper your activities in terms of sports in particular, because your intents overall did not want you to go in that direction. You kept those physical abilities around, though, the feeling for sports in school, with the idea that you could fall back upon them if need be. But you would have considered that a partial failure. Your high school art teacher, Miss Bowman, lent you the money to study art in New York City. The comics acquainted you with what I will call a kind of surface art, and also, in a way, acquainted you with caricatures of social reality. Also involved, however, were folk dreams, as, for example, with Captain Marvel. While you happily walked and caroused quite innocently, you also began half unconsciously to further question the natural, not necessarily of society, but of the individual lives you met within it. The deep drives of your personality began to make their way now. Simple enough incidents like shoveling the driveway can bother you because they arouse old conflicts having to do with your earlier situation and the decision. Say, to explore your mental and creative abilities rather than to pursue the physical ones in the excellence of sports. The excellence in sports, however, also involved the accepted thing to do. Sports even then were looked up to. Rewards were instantaneous for good performance. This involves black and white thinking again. However, for you thought of perfect performance in sports, high excellence. Something like the driveway usually involves an inner dilemma. Shall I do creative work or physical activity? In rather absolute terms. The driveway involves the sports situation. and also the mainline America thing. 4. Shouldn't you be shoveling the work like your neighbor? This involves questions like, how different am I from my neighbor? What does he think of me working at home? Etc. Give us a moment. The issue is obviously clouded by current ones, so that different details in a day can contribute or serve as triggers. When you do not approve of yourself, then you do not approve of your own power, and so you pretend that you have none. Often the word power has bad implications. Power corrupts, for example. Often you both pretend that you have no power in the society, and this is not the case. Give us a moment. Because you have not seen yourself clearly, you cannot see or judge the difference in your quality of thought from your early adult years, for example, or perceive what you have learned. But all of your difficulties are based to one extent or another on self-rejection that has gone unquestioned. There is nothing wrong, of course, with having your driveway plowed because you have other things that you want to do. That is a simple accident choice. Give us a moment. When you feel at the same time that you must and should plow the driveway out yourself, to prove that you are the same as your neighbor, or to prove that you are physically agile. And on the other hand, if you feel that you do not want to plow out the driveway at all, then you are in a quandary. And when you shovel, you tell your body to shovel and not to shovel at the same time, setting your muscles against each other. Texas or whatever might serve as a trigger, but the basic point is that you do not approve of what you are doing. If you shovel the drive, you think you should be working, and vice versa sometimes. The session should help you here. Give us a moment. In all cases, over-exaggerations are involved. If you shovel, you are not suddenly going to decide to devote yourself to a life of physical chores and meaningless activity and ignore your creative work. You are not that kind of person. If you paint or write steadily, that does not mean you will let all chores go. You are not that kind of person. If Rupert works, he is not suddenly going to turn into a television personality and ignore his inner work. He is not that kind of person. Misunderstandings of your own abilities and characteristics are responsible for such unfortunate conclusions. Again, the New Year resolutions, really understood, can help you, for they will dissolve such thoughts. Do you have questions? Ralph said, well, we are making progress, I think. We read the resolutions over several times a day. They said you have made progress. Ralph said Jane continues to improve. They said indeed, the session should also help there. Ralph said okay. They said I bid you a fond and hearty good evening. Ralph said thank you very much.